Welcome with me, Scott Roberts.
Thank you, Toastmasters and guests. Garrison Keillor, A Life of Loss and Gratitude. What was his early life like? Garrison Keillor is the most famous radio personality of the last part of the 20th century. He is an author, singer, humorist, raconteur extraordinaire, and voice actor. Born in 1942, he was the third child of six, three brothers and two sisters. His parents came from large families. His father's family consisted of 10 children, his mother, 13 children. Garrison was a member of the Plymouth Brethren Evangelical Church. And here are pictures of his church. It's very simple, and religion was very important to him and his family. The Plymouth Brethren interpret the Bible literally. There are no ministers, women are inferior to men, are not allowed to speak in church, and must cover their heads in church. There are no signs of the cross or the face of Jesus Christ in the church. Men speak as the Spirit moves them. Any sign of worldliness was forbidden. No music, no dancing, no television, no movies, no card playing or reading fiction. The only book you were allowed to read was the Bible. The men in the Keillor family were dour, taciturn, and grim. None told stories or jokes, laughed, or shared their feelings. That was considered non-masculine and weak. Overwhelmingly, Garrison was raised by his 18 aunts who laughed, played, told stories, and were emotionally supportive and available to him. How did Garrison Keillor get into radio, and what role did a Danish ballerina play? This is an interesting story that he talks about in his autobiography called A Minnesota Life. Keillor was graduated from the University of Minnesota in 1966 as an English major. His goal was to be a writer, and for that reason, he was a reporter for the St. Paul Pioneer Press, a collegiate newspaper. In seeking to interview a Danish ballet dancer whom he accidentally observed naked as she was posing in front of a mirror, he met the owner of the local radio station who liked Garrison's voice. He offered a job to Garrison to be a radio host without pay. Garrison was delighted to accept it because of his having listened to the austere homilies at the Plymouth Brethren Church. Garrison could speak with solemn authority, and the radio owner liked that. He thereby started his radio career in 1966 because he wanted to meet a ballet dancer whom he saw naked. When did Garrison hit the big time? When did his radio performance hit the big time? In 1969, the Minnesota Public Radio hired Garrison to DJ a station devoted solely to classical music. Slowly, Garrison molded the radio station to become more of a variety show with storytelling, humorous skits, musicians, jokes, and sound effects. The show became wildly popular. By 1974, Garrison had created his radio show called Prairie Home Companion. In 1980, the program director of Minnesota Public Radio was able to link his local radio station to 13 satellite links. And this was the watershed of Garrison's radio career. Suddenly, Prairie Home Companion could be heard anywhere in the United States or in the world. Garrison, to his bewilderment, became an international star along with his modest crew of 8 or 9 employees. So what is the Prairie Home Companion? PHC, the acronym for it, is the name of Garrison's radio program wherein he tells stories about a fictitious small town in Minnesota called Lake Wobegon. However, Garrison told stories about Lake Wobegon as if they were all true. He even identified imaginary sponsors for the program, Powder Milk Biscuits. Toward this end, Garrison was uniquely gifted and did something that no one else could do. He spoke off the cuff and told his stories, usually humorous, with the utmost sincerity. As an entertaining speaker, he was simply without peer. He is self-effacing, is believable, easy to listen to, and his concluding lines at the end of every PHC broadcast were always the same. At Lake Wobegon, quote, all the women are strong, the men good looking, and the children above average. Here is Garrison at his peak in 2016 when he announced his retirement. Garrison has entertained audiences all over the world, before presidents, before members of Congress and foreign dignitaries. He was invited to give commencement addresses at Harvard, Princeton, and innumerable universities. PHC traveled to Europe, Japan, the Scandinavian countries, Russia, and South America. At his peak, Garrison's radio show had more than 4 million devotees. His PHC radio show was broadcast on more than 800 radio stations worldwide on every Saturday night. But what happened next? In 2017, after Garrison retired, a female employee who worked off-site accused Garrison of inappropriate sexual touching. Garrison and this unidentified female had been best of friends. They had flirted for years playfully. Garrison had placed his hand on her back to comfort her regarding a problem she was having. And she filed a complaint against him for that. No lawsuit was filed. No money was paid to her. There were no allegations of intercourse, kissing, or unbuttoning. To this day, she remains completely anonymous. As a result of this, what did Garrison immediately lose? After over 40 years of service, Minnesota Public Radio fired Garrison in a 90-second telephone call after 40 years of service, starting in 1974. MPR interviewed 5 former female employees of PHC who stated that Garrison made them feel uncomfortable when he looked at them. So what did Garrison lose? Following the sexual harassment allegation, Viking Penguin canceled his contract for numerous books. Washington Post canceled his weekly column. All upcoming tours and speaking engagements were canceled. The University of Minnesota, that had been so proud that he was an alumnus thereof, removed his name from the list of distinguished alumni. He was subjected to so much hostility in Minnesota, his home state. He and his wife were forced to move to New York City, where they opened a bookstore. What was Garrison's reaction to these devastating losses? And in one word, it was gratitude. And he wrote a book about that, as you can see, Serenity at 70, Gaiety at 90. Garrison is absolutely gracious to his accuser. He never mentions her name, but released to the local newspaper after her accusation hundreds of emails where both parties engaged in fantasy and playful flirting. He does not consider himself a victim to the Me Too movement, but realizes that he obviously crossed the line with his female colleague and is deeply apologetic for that. His casual touching of this female colleague, although committed by thousands of employers in other contexts, became inappropriate because the culture changed with the Me Too movement. Garrison wishes his accuser the best. Oddly, his accuser asked to work for him after he retired. Can you imagine that? In his book, Serenity at 70, Gaiety at 80, Garrison is presently 82 years old. Garrison celebrates with profuse gratitude all of the good fortune he has enjoyed in life. He is deeply grateful that people still come out in droves to hear him talk about Lake Wobegon. Garrison is a paradigm of gratitude and being at peace with himself. In summary, Garrison doesn't grieve for what he has lost. He celebrates with enormous gratitude what he has: his wife, his friends, his health, and most importantly, his ability to work still, talking about Lake Wobegon. Thank you, Toastmasters and guests.